Tonight we're going to take a little bit of a different turn, but I think you will find this equally compelling. And for the question and the comment about entrepreneurship being more than just starting a company from an idea, I think you'll find a lot in this presentation. Dr. Smith is the director of the MedStar Institute for Innovation. He's also the Chief Innovation Officer at MedStar Health. MedStar, for those of you, you've seen their signage all over town, including here on campus. They are one of the largest employers in the region, and what we don't often hear about is the leadership role that they're playing even on a national and global scale in really thinking about innovation in the healthcare arena. And there are a number of different programs that Dr. Smith and his team have really come out with, including things around data and human factors, which I hope that he will touch on, and if he doesn't, I will ask him about it in the Q&A afterwards. But I hope that you will find him as interesting and compelling as we have. He's been a good friend to us at 1776 and to me personally. And I think you'll find him not what you would expect when you think about an innovator inside an organization. So with that, come on down.
So my name is Mark Smith. Jeff introduced me as a CIO. You know the times are changing when CIO used to mean Chief Information Officer, and now it means Chief Innovation Officer. I've never been in a small company. I've never been an entrepreneur in a traditional sense. So what am I doing here? Well, I'm going to tell you the story of why I'm here, because I think I have the heart and soul of a startup entrepreneur, except that I've done it in a different way in a very, very large organization. The title of this talk is about the mammoth, working from inside the mammoth. And as far as I'm concerned, I've also, as some of you have alluded to, want to do things that have impact. I always wanted to live a life of impact. I'm a physician. I'm an emergency physician, and I've actually been, not anymore, but took care of patients at the George Washington University Emergency Department and the Washington Hospital Center Emergency Department for more than 25 years. So every single person that I encountered, I felt that I was having impact in a real positive sense. But what I'm going to tell you the story of here is how I'm hoping we can have impact not only locally, regionally, but actually nationally and globally. So the title is Moving the Mammoth from Within. You saw that mammoth there. That one looks a little nicer. And my job is to show you there's a pet mammoth, very sort of sweet and cuddly. So let me start with a question. What do Google, MedStar, Facebook, and Twitter have in common? Not four companies that you would ordinarily have together, maybe numbers 1, 3, and 4. Well, the answer is none of them existed before 1998. That's Google's first splash page. There, Google was always in beta at that time. There's MedStar Health. And as Donna said, we'll talk a little bit about it, but we were formed in 1999 by the merger of a couple of hospitals in DC and 5 hospitals in Baltimore. That was, those of you who saw that social network movie, The Facebook, that was its original splash page. And that was 2004. It's pretty amazing, huh? And that was Twitter, okay? No E. You notice these names change as the time goes on, and that was 2006. So it's really a pretty remarkable story. And so before 1998, there were none of them. And I'd like to think that each and every one of these are companies that are companies of not only the present, but of the future. So MedStar Health is a not-for-profit healthcare system. It is the largest system, 20% of the market in the Baltimore, Washington area. And it's got about $5 billion in annual revenues. It's inpatient, it's outpatient, it's distributed. You're seeing MedStar Prom Cares all over. We're going into virtual visits. It's a fractaloid, a microcosm of healthcare in America. Urban, suburban, rural, indigent, middle class, wealthy. Teaching hospitals with residents, research, private practice hospitals, community hospitals, transport program, visiting nurse association. I like to say, you know, it's a great clinical laboratory because I like to say, if it works at MedStar, it will work anywhere in this country because we are every system. So, there are a couple of, I'm the director, as Donna said, of the MedStar Institute for Innovation. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history. It's good to start with the foundational premises. it was clear that if MedStar was really going to ascend to the top tier of greatness in a healthcare system, as a healthcare system, and also be able to move with the changes, maybe even lead the changes, we have to innovate. Foundational premise number 2 is that the tyranny of the daily trumps the pursuit of the remarkable. Now, those of you who haven't worked in big companies may not realize that, but it's emails, it's personnel crises, it's jockeying interdepartmental tensions, it's quarterly objectives, it's budget. Very tough to look over the mountains and try to blaze a trail. And foundational, this is my depiction, by the way, of tyranny of the daily. There's no white space. There's no think space. You are occupied 9 hours a day, 10 hours a day. Even on Wednesday at 3:30, we've scheduled to go to the bathroom. That is my depiction of the pursuit of the remarkable. That's really what all of us are after. So, and the third foundational premise was that there exists a huge amount of untapped creative and intellectual talent in this 30,000 associate organization. It's just kind of was wandering lost in the desert, like Brownie in motion. And what it needed was an attractor to kind of harmonize it, make it resonant, and in some sense unlock the potential energy that was locked up within each and every person. I wanted to cover, so I said I've never done a startup in the traditional sense, but I like to think the organization I have, which I'm the leader of, is a startup. And here's why we need the energy of startups. And this is taken from a blog that is on the 1776 site, but there are 4 types of dynamics that say you've got to adopt a startup mentality. Healthcare undergoing disruptive innovation, I don't need to tell you about that. Organizational dynamics, the status quo is a huge attractor. It is always easier not to change than to change. And there's an inherent inertia in large size organizations. The third, we've talked about, the tyranny of the daily. And the fourth is, all these big companies are making money, and they are reluctant to change what they're doing. You've heard the phrase, kill your cash cow. That's a harsh image. So I've changed it to put your cash cow out to pasture. It's the today, tomorrow dilemma in healthcare. Right now we're a fee-for-service business, and we're moving to a subscription service business, which will align the incentives of keeping people well and sustaining your margins. Right now, the only way to sustain margins is to do more and more and more, and it's a terrible malalignment of the ethical medical mission that we have and the financial incentives. So, because of those three foundational premises, and because of that, those 4 dynamics, in 2009, Ken Samet, who is the CEO of MedStar Health, chartered the MedStar Institute for Innovation. We were going to call it MII, but the Nintendo Wii, those of you who haven't know that the MII is the avatar, so we couldn't. And so then we realized our address is 3007 Tilden Street, and so we became MI2. And that's what has stuck with us. And the essence of our work, I always think if you need to express stuff pithily, in a one-pager, in a one-paragrapher, which is sort of an elevator conversation, in one sentence, or even a couple of words in a bumper sticker. So the essence of our work is to try to create a vibrant innovation ecosystem at MedStar. Why? To transform care and advance health. Sometimes the best way to know what you are is what you're not, by defining what we're not. And so we are not the MedStar Bureau of Innovation. And I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about why this kind of structured, rigorous, rigid approach to innovation is destined to fail. And I'm happy to discuss that with Donna. Right now, if you're a healthcare system without an innovation center, you're hopelessly retro. Everyone has them. And what do? Well, they do lots of things. And there's really no focused mission of them. Some of them are commercialization operations, tech transfer, try to take the good ideas of your associates and try to take them to market. Some are basically performance improvement shops. I don't think that's innovation. Some are catalyzing a culture. The second to the last one there is something that we have discovered and tried to move aggressively in, which is that moving into white space. MedStar is a relatively young organization. We cannot compete in certain ways with systems that have a storied history in biomedical research, deep systems there. But where there's white space, we can move. We're as smart as anyone and can be more nimble. And so we've actually, and you don't know what the white space is, you kind of stumble upon it, which we'll also talk about. We have a Center for Human Factors in Healthcare, a Center for Engagement and Influence in Health, things that most innovation centers would not touch. We employ a three-axis strategy across MedStar: catalyze, innovate, and connect. So catalyze means trying to raise the innovation energy across the organization, unlock it with a various set of means, whether it's challenges, conferences. We have an app now that's an innovation thinking app. Innovate is where we're doing the innovation in these white space areas. And one area that we had no idea was going to be such an important piece is connect. The thesis is if you talk only to yourself, you stay where you are. If you talk only to others in healthcare, you move with the pack. It's only by getting outside of your own domain that you can leap and catapult. And these big healthcare systems are very hard for entrepreneurs to get into. You knock on the door, which door? And everyone's sort of busy with their operations. So it turned out, through serendipity, as most great things happen, that I walked into 1776 one day. And within 30 minutes, I knew it. The energy was phenomenal. It actually reminded me of the energy of social and political change that occurred in the 60s and 70s. It was, we used those modalities, and now it's social entrepreneurship that can try to change the world. And I said, look, we got to be part of this. And so one thing led to another, as it often does, and MedStar became the fourth and final founding partner of 1776, and it's been a great relationship since. So I was asked to talk about some rules for innovation centers in a healthcare system. Again, this is also a blog piece. The only thing a couple things I just want to point out. In a big organization, where you stand on the org chart matters. Okay? We report to the CEO. So people think I've got some special route in, so it kind of imbues me and our piece of the organization with a certain stature. And we can, when you have nobody between you and the CEO, there's nobody else to say no except the top person. Whereas if you've got 3 or 4 layers, anybody can say no. The emulate Pat Riley. Pat Riley is the coach and now the president of the Miami Heat. Used to be with the Lakers. And basically, never take the credit for yourself. It's, if somebody comes up with something that you help them with, you didn't do anything, it's all them. And pull, not push. I try to spend as little time as possible trying to convince somebody that I have something good that they should want or need. Because that is wasted energy, that kind of convincing. I'd rather find someone who is hungry for what we have to offer and use 100% of my energy to help them achieve their goal. And there's plenty of people out there. It's sort of the Harry met Sally, I want what she's having moment. That's the org chart. So there's Ken Salmon as the president on top, and you've got your usual rectangular blocks all around. And look at that, right there, up there in an oval, is MedStar Institute for Renovation. Now, that was actually Ken's idea. Sort of metaphoric, we're outside the box. which we are, and it means that certain rules have to be broken, and we're given a wide berth. So one thing we did, which is, I think it was extremely helpful, we had to build our own culture, and to do that we had to have a separate place. If we had moved into corporate headquarters, I don't think we would have gotten to where we are. It's really become a kind of gathering point now across the organization. Again, an attractor for the talented people that we have in the organization. And you need to have budgetary discretion. In a big organization, to get a capital request through is often 4 to 6 months, things costing several $1,000s. It's crazy. They're usually approved, but it still takes that much time. You've got to be able to have an idea and be able to execute on it and get the equipment you need in a couple of days. That's a great poem. It's The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. So why do I have it up here? First of all, it's a little bit of a surprise. You know, innovation is about surprise. Secondly, it's William Carlos Williams is a physician, so I sort of feel a certain kinship with him. Thirdly, poetry is probably the best expression of the two-word truth that words matter, and every single word there makes a difference. And the fourth, we'll get to at the end, is this is as good an expression of the real world practice that you can find. What it has to have also, and a lot of people write books on this, is the theory behind it. So look at these words: respect, integrity, teamwork, communications. This is probably the stated values of 90% of the Fortune 500 companies right now. Here's the problem. They don't mean anything anymore. They're fading, okay? They've lost their power, they've lost their valence, they've lost their energy, their punch, and there's actually a concept, there's a name for that. It's called semantic saturation. If you remember when you were a kid, you said a word over and over again, it would lose meaning. That's what's going on here. Well, I think we have to be respectful of innovation and try to make sure that it's more like motherhood or apple pie, two concepts that have not lost their punch and power. So, take a minute, you probably have done this, but it's perhaps before, take a minute, write down your thoughts about what makes something an innovation. Okay, we're going to try to define it precisely, and you'll see why in a sec. Okay? You probably new, different, novel, something that didn't come before. I think most of you probably wrote that down. But to really be an innovation, something has to be used. It can't just be an idea. Right? That's the essence. It's got creativity in action. Now look at this. Is this an innovation for you allergy sufferers? Well, it's novel, it's in use, but a real innovation adds substantive value. This does not. So different and novel, in use, and adds value. And remember I said about when I showed you the MedStar Institute for Innovation, the MedStar Bureau of Innovation picture, I said to find out what something is, one of the best ways of defining it is to ask what it is not. Try to find the sharp boundary between. And let me point out to you this, what I'm going to call the continuum of intentional change. You're trying to make something better. The first, simplest one is execution. You know what the right thing to do is, like wash your hands before you go into a patient room, but only 75 or 80% of people are doing it. So executing a simple rule that everybody knows, that's sort of the most elementary part of making your operation better. The next is, and that in some sense that's the Six Sigma reducing variance, trying to get the improvement piece is where you're improving your processes. You're applying, for example, lean methodology and taking out waste in the system. The essence of improvement, I would submit to you, is that it's sort of incremental. It's continuous. The thing about innovation is that it is discontinuous. Okay? It is a non-incremental improvement. So the person who came up with the idea to take the Toyota production system model of lean and bring it over to healthcare. That in itself was an innovation. And transformation is innovation on a big scale. So if you want a kind of graphic, continuous improvement versus the discontinuous, non-incremental aspect of innovation. And why that last one's critically important, because I would submit to you that the discontinuous jump shift of innovation, we'll call it, requires a shift in thinking. You've got to think differently in order to do differently. And actually, in order to think differently, you have to sort of see and understand the world differently from what you're doing now. You need different categories. The master of that, and that was that was a theory that really was innovation, the theory of special and general theories of relativity back in 1905. It's when it started. So my 5-word definition of innovation is that it's something that is discontinuously different that makes a difference. I'm going to take 5 more minutes, Donna. Okay? So let me give you a couple of simple rules that we operate by, and I think you should resonate to these as budding entrepreneurs. Rule number 1 is there is always a better way, okay? That innovation is a fundamentally positive stance towards the future. There's always a better way, and I'm going to figure it out and find it out. And there's a thing in medicine now, we're going to talk about best practices, use best practices. I've taken that out of my vocabulary. There's no such thing as a best practice. There's a better practice, but 2 years from now, there'll be an even better one. How do you know where to innovate? So here are my 4 rules for how you know where something is crying out for innovation. When something hasn't changed in 40 years, it is either a perfect design, like the paper clip, the safety pin, the Stanley Power Lock tape measure, or it's crying out for innovation. Now, I'll give you an example of something that, if you can figure this one out, you'll help everyone, that hasn't changed in 90 years in healthcare. 90 years, pretty amazing. How we document care. We document care with text. We handwrite, we type, we check boxes. The world's moved on. It's moved on to images, moved on to video, and the amount of inaccuracy, the amount of extra time it takes is a huge, huge drain on the healthcare system. And every time you encounter something and you say to yourself, you know, there's got to be a better way, or I can't believe someone designed it this way, that's also crying out for innovation. So it's really all around us, and you may be too young for this to work, but we tried this with a kind of disparate group. And when you go home tonight or tomorrow, think back to when you were a kid. What hasn't changed since then? And think back to when you were a kid and what was there then that is no longer now. It's a really interesting exercise. I'll tell you one, we kind of crowdsourced this. One thing that came up on what hasn't changed since we were kids was how you move vertically in a building. Steps, escalator, elevators. They're pretty much identical to what they were 40 years ago. Here's something that has changed. That's a gas cap, which you won't know the pain of taking your gas cap off, putting it on the roof of your car, driving away, right? And there's actually a term for that. It's called a post-completion error. When you finish the job that you're trying to do, you tend to not want to do any of the subsequent steps. So you put a piece of paper in the copy machine, you make a copy, and you walk away and leave the original under the glass, because the completion step was to get the copy. ATM card, you put it in, you get your money, the card comes back, but you're gone. They designed that out because you have to take your card now before you get your money. And what they do with the gas cap, brilliant, simple, they tethered it. Now I thought, why didn't they think of that 30 years ago? And then someone pointed out to me, it's not as easy, because if you had to turn and twist the cap, the cord would twist around it unless you had a one-click system or unless you had a kind of a swivel cap. So we talked about engaging with the outside. And that's what we've done with 1776. And I must say, it has been absolutely invigorating. and I've already talked about if we seek ideas outside of healthcare, we can leap boundaries. I'm going to recommend 2 books to you. This is, in my view, the best book on innovation that's been written, by Stephen Johnson, Where Good Ideas Come From, The Natural History of Innovation. Has concepts like liquid network, the adjacent possible. He actually has a second book that's also great about this, where it's How We Got to Now. So that's one thing to read. Okay, here is, this is the part that you probably haven't heard, because I wasn't even aware of it myself until I went to a talk about 2 weeks ago that was the best talk I've heard in 5 years. And the rule is to seek chance encounters of the extraordinary kind, okay? Wonderful treasures are buried along the path to nowhere in particular. That is Louis Pasteur. He said, chance favors the prepared mind. You have your eyes open, you have to be curious. Here's a good example. You know what that is? It's a burdock burr. You know, it's kind of a plant thing, those things that stick to you. Well, in 1948, there was a Swiss engineer, Georges de Mistral, who was walking in the mountains with his dog, came back, these things were sticking to his dog's coat. He looked a little more closely and he realized it was a kind of hook and loop type of attachment of the burdock burr to the dog's skin, hair and coat. And what did he invent? Velcro. Now, it took him 8-10 years to get a patent to do, because things take time, but that could not have been predicted. So this is the second book, which I can't tell you how important I think this is. It's a book called Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned by Ken Stanley. He has a YouTube talk. Just go, Ken Stanley, Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned. That was the talk that I saw. That will blow your mind. And here is the, so I see some people are writing it down. It's Ken Stanley, Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned. It's the myth of having objectives. Very counterintuitive. And this was his quote. It's actually more, countless treasures are buried along the path to nowhere in particular. And the other way my version of this is, you won't get there by going there. And Ken Samet knew that back in 2009. Because in 2009, when he chartered the MedStar Institute for Innovation, he said, if I knew what the MedStar Institute for Innovation was going to be, it wouldn't be very innovative. Humble, one person does have all the answers, but very wise. Things are going to change, the environment changes, things happen, and one thing leads to another, leads to another. It's this amazing chain in a complex system. Variant of the butterfly effect, you know, the sensitive dependence on initial conditions, that small things have large effects. The unintended consequences. So I'm going to close with, that's a advisor to 3 presidents and now a CNN commentator, David Gergen. I heard a talk he gave about 3 qualities for greatness in a president: character, ambition, and curiosity. And I want to stress the third. I mean, the key to being successful in this is to being completely curious. And now I'm going to show you what I think is, I told you what the greatest talk in the last 5 years. I'm going to tell you about the greatest non-electronic invention of the last 50 years that has revolutionized global commerce. Pretty good, huh? No electronics, very simple, a simple shape. What is it? It's the container. It's pretty amazing. Ship to train to truck, originally constructed to prevent pilferage. And the person who kind of filed a patent on it gave up the patent. He said, we need an open standard. There may be some lessons there. Single design for across the world. His company, by the way, made the cranes that lifted the containers. And so actually the 3 most successful initiatives of the MedStar Institute for Innovation, of which I count 1776 and the National Center for Human Factors in Healthcare as the 2 most important, none were planned, none, when we first started, and all began with a chance encounter and a personal relationship. And the primacy of strong personal relationships and working with people whom you trust and like is absolutely critical. I'm going to stop there and ask Dawn if she would like to have a brief conversation before the panel.